Hey there, I'm Neil. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the host of my new podcast, Pause and Rewind. I'll be chatting to changemakers, thought leaders, and role models who all share a common goal. They're striving to make the world a more inclusive place. And let's face it, we need it. Each guest has a unique story when it comes to doing their thing, and we often know who people are in the now. But how much do we really know about them? Pause and Rewind takes a moment to explore the experiences in my guest's life that led them to where and who they are now. Because everyone loves an origin story. We'll dive into tales, anecdotes, and what makes our guests tick. So, are you ready to pause and rewind? Hey there, I'm Neil, and for this episode of Pause and Rewind, I got to sit down with a former colleague, but someone who's very much a friend, Polly Shute. Polly literally gets shit done. She is the founder of Out and Wild Festival, a festival solely for queer women. She also is the co-founder of Outspoken Speakers Bureau, a speakers bureau that's dedicated to queer women and non-binary folk. And last year, she successfully launched the first ever Pride Swim. She has a wealth of experience in marketing, sales, partnerships, and she's just a brilliant person to work with. But I didn't know much about her story, her backstory, her origin story, and which is what Pause and Rewind is all about. And it was brilliant getting time to spend with her and having quality conversation. So I hope you enjoy this. Cheers. Hey there, Polly. Welcome to Pause and Rewind.
Thanks, Neil. It's lovely to be with you.
It's so good to have you here, and I'm so excited to hear about your origin story. I feel really lucky that since we met last year, I've got to work with you and get to know you on loads of things. But I'm really, really excited to hear all about you and your origin story and about little Polly as well.
Yeah. Well, I've had to think back, but yes, it's great to talk about that. I don't often talk about younger Polly, as I mainly talk about when I came out at 41. So yeah, it's great.
This is the thing about pause and rewind. It is about taking that time to reflect as well, and to look back because we often know like people who people are in the now, right? We know I know all the exciting things that you get up to, but taking that moment to get to know each other a little better and the power of storytelling. But before we do press pause and rewind, Holly, you do so much, right? There is so much that you literally are so passionate about, from kind of Out and Wild through to Pride Swim. How do you keep on top of it all?
With difficulty sometimes. I guess somewhere along there's a couple of things that drove me forward. I read a while ago, actually, probably about 8 years ago. I read the book of the story of the night, which was Shoot. It's called Shoe Dog. It's a really great business book, and it really stuck with me about how successful Nike is, but how the person that Phil Knight, who set it up, went through so many issues and so many challenges to market his trainers. And within that, there was lots of bad luck and lots of good luck, but he just kept going. And there were loads of times he could have thrown in the towel and said, I'm just going to stop. And he didn't. And when I first started wanting to, I guess, be an entrepreneur and create my own events and my own activities, I kept thinking about that when I started, because I think often what stops us from doing anything is that kind of little voice in our head that says it isn't working, or this isn't going to work, or you can't do it, or you're not good enough, or when a problem comes up, you can't get past this and throw the towel in. And I just thought I'm going to try a load of different things and see which ones work. And it's at the moment it's great, but also challenging because a lot of them are working. So we're into year 3 of the festival, and already we're well up on ticket sales from last year, and we're going to have a great festival. The Pride Swim's gone from 1 swim to 20 odd, and I was thinking it would probably go to 3. And the speaker agency is also beginning to grow. So I'm not going to complain because I'm in an enviable position, but I do think it's a testament to sometimes you just have to get on with things and not procrastinate. And momentum is an amazing thing.
I mean, I think we share some of that in common, that really like loving balancing loads of different things and keeping them on the go. For me, I love the variety. How do
Yeah.
you look after yourself through it all?
Not probably not as well as I should do, considering I run a wellness festival. But I am beginning to do more. I think I'm beginning to realize that you have ebbs and flows, and you have to just, when it's really busy, you just have to get things done. When you've got a business, you can't just stop and say, I don't want to do that sometimes. But when there is downtime, and when I have slower days, I will just go out for a walk with the dog, or I've started doing intermediate swimming lessons. I don't want to say swimming lessons because people will think I run a pride swim and I can't swim. I can swim, but I'd like to be better. So I know the things that give me energy back, and I know the things that I need to do if I'm challenged, and I just practice that more. But it is something that I think when you work for yourself and you're running things and there isn't always a backup, although I do have, I'm lucky enough to have lots of volunteers and to have a great business partner on Outspoken with Raga. I think you do have to really sometimes just get on with things, but also recognize when there's downtime, it's okay to use it.
For sure, 100%, 100%. And I think, we're all very good at preaching about well-being and looking after ourselves until it comes to ourselves.
Yes.
Let's talk about Outspoken. I definitely consider you one of my massive role models in inclusion. And I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. You generally inspire inclusion in lots of others as well. Let's talk about Outspoken. Tell us a little bit about it and what does it mean to you?
I guess one of the things, I mean, I came out at 41 and I didn't see a lot of people like me around at the time. And that, I'm not saying that was the only reason I came out at 41, but it was certainly a defining reason that meant I came out later in life rather than earlier. And when I joined the board of Pride in London, which I loved, I was on the board for about 5 years. It was then that I realised how male dominated everything is in the queer world. And how I would go to events and it would all be very male dominated stages. And I just thought there's not enough queer voices, women's voices, and non binary voices out there. And it was something that frustrated me for a while. And when I met Raga, which was probably about a year and a half ago now, I think Raga and I are both quite, have quite a big philosophical focus. And I think both of us thought we were destined to meet and there was a reason for us to meet. And both of us, Raga obviously run speaker agencies before. Both of us were passionate around increasing the visibility and voice of queer women, and especially queer women from minority backgrounds. It seemed an obvious thing to set up the agency, and an obvious gap in the market, that not only could we promote queer voices, but with the training and development courses that we're going to put in place, we can actually, and this I'm going to be most proud of, we can actually develop new voices. Because I do feel even now you see the same people and the same queer women on the circuit. It seems to be there's about 20 of them that everyone just books.
Yeah.
And I would just like to see more queer women from challenged backgrounds, perhaps people that don't even work, but have great stories to tell, go out there and not just tell their stories, but also help shape products, and how the workplace develops by, giving their account on what it's like to live their life.
Yeah, no. And I think a lot of the people on the scene who do get booked time and time again, do recognize that actually, because I've spoken to the couple of them and they've said after an event, I really hope I'm not asked to do this event again. I think that many people recognize the fact that there is a need to listen to a
Yeah,
more diverse set of voices. You and Raga are such a brilliant duo as well. You work so well together, and I'm a huge advocate for what you're doing with Outspoken, as you know.
thank
So
you.
thanks for joining today. Are you ready to pause and rewind?
I am ready to pause and rewind.
Let's go for it. So, take me back. Tell me all about little Polly.
Well, little Polly grew up a long time ago because I'm 56 now. So I grew up in a sleepy little village in Dorset. And I had quite an idyllic, I guess in a lot of ways, I had quite an idyllic childhood. We had a nice house, we had a big garden with a river at the bottom. I had a mum that was at home and a dad that worked and two brothers. And up until the age of, I would say 12, when we had to move, I didn't ever think about my life being anything but pretty happy. I mean, obviously, I have the moments that everybody else does where you're challenged or you get upset. But the one thing I do remember quite clearly, which obviously showed that I was a lesbian, was I was definitely more attracted and more linked to women and well, certainly girls in my school. I remember my first crush was on a girl called Rachel, in my class, when I was probably about, I must have been about 8 or 9, and I had a massive crush on her. And I think at the time I really felt it, and now I can kind of recognize and understand that emotion. But at the time, I just let it go, and just because I didn't know what gay was, I just assumed it was a friendship thing. And yeah, I would say that I grew up in a great environment. I lived in the country. I was very close to the sea. We went swimming a lot. I had supportive parents, and all that was great until the age of 12. And then my dad had undiagnosed bipolar, and things started kind of unraveling then. But up until the age of 12, I'd say I had a really lucky childhood. I had two brothers who I got on with. I played football and watched football incessantly and was a real tomboy, as you can probably imagine.
I mean, all of that shines through in all of the activities that you do now. Your love of the outdoors and what you're
Yeah.
doing with Out and Wild and Pride Swim. So it's brilliant that that part of you is still very much there. You know, you've shared a little about your dad, and thank you for sharing. Taking it back a little bit before that moment when in your early teenage years, and what are some of your favorite earliest memories, or perhaps even your favorite anecdote that you've been told about yourself as a little one?
Well, my mum always told me that I was just cried incessantly when I was a baby. And she said, you know, as soon as we brought you home, you just cried literally all the time. And my dad would take me out in the car or take me out in the pram at 4 o'clock in the morning, just to kind of try and give my mum some peace, and also I think the neighbours. So I was an incessant crier, and I tried to do everything too early. That won't surprise you, Neil. So
No.
I guess the favourite anecdote my mum had of me was when I was about 18 months old. I threw myself out of my high chair in frustration about something or other, and they put me back in the high chair, and I continued crying all evening. And it wasn't until later that my mum realised the crying was slightly different, and I'd actually fractured my femur. But because I just cried all the time anyway, they didn't know. My mum felt awfully guilty, but took me into hospital and etc. But yes, so that was. But my mum said it was just typical of you to throw yourself out in frustration, and I think I remember that. I don't remember that moment, obviously, but I also remember my sense of frustration when I was growing up, that there were things that I couldn't do, whether it was I couldn't do them physically or I wasn't allowed to do them. I was always somebody that would just be pushing boundaries and just get intensely frustrated if I couldn't do something.
Do you still see a little bit of that in you?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, and I think I've got a lot better at recognizing there's certain things I'm not good at, and just to stop doing them, or just to let someone else do it, for example. But there still is a stubbornness in me that says I want to do that. And if someone tells me I can't, there's always a little switch that wants to go, I can. And it's just now I've learned to moderate it a bit more.
Not too much. You don't want to moderate it too much because you know. Um, you know, that's pretty self-aware, like looking back and seeing that. When was the first moment you had a sense of what the world was like? You know, your world around you and discovering your sense of self and your place in that.
Um, God, that's a good question. Um, I don't think I thought about it when I was younger and we lived in Dorset. I just existed, and I grew up with friends near me, and I just felt quite comfortable about who I was. I never had any real issues about it. And then we moved at quite a formative age for myself. So I was probably about 13 when we moved, and I moved from sleepy Dorset to Bedfordshire, and I was bullied a bit, because I spoke in a very different way. I actually spoke. I was quite well spoken. It wasn't that I had a country accent. I was quite well spoken, and I suddenly went to a comprehensive in Bedfordshire, where I got bullied a bit for it. And I suddenly had an idea that the kind of cute little world that I'd grown up in, where I knew everybody and felt very comfortable about myself, suddenly I was thrust into a world where I felt I didn't belong for the first time. And that was probably the first time ever that I started feeling something that I think a lot of people who are queer feel, which is a sense of not quite fitting in and not belonging. And I think it was a combination of me perhaps understanding that I was a bit different, which I now put down to being gay, but also going into an alien environment and finding that not everybody was automatically my friend. And I think that gave me a real sense that the world wasn't as comfortable and as supporting as the one that I'd grown up in Dorset.
I had a similar experience, changed schools, moved away from Essex to Lincolnshire, moved back to Essex, and by the time I'd moved back, I'd lost a lot of my Essex twang, and so it
Yeah,
developed this kind of like normal posh
yeah,
accent. So got bullied for exactly the same thing. And I think it was probably that feeling a bit different. That feeling a bit different kind of always been there, but it was that sense of I don't fit into this
yeah,
environment.
yeah. No, definitely. And I think that started me thinking that the world wasn't the place that I thought it would be. And I needed to watch people and understand people better. And I've always been a people watcher. So my first career was always around marketing, and in marketing, because I think I've always been interested in what makes people and motivates people do things. You know, I work for retail marketing, and a lot of that is obviously what makes people buy things. But also, I've just always been interested in why does someone do what they do and what's their motivation and their reasons behind it. And I think that awakening came when I moved, and suddenly everything was different, and I really had to think about how people were approaching me and how people were seeing me. So I think that was an early awakening of a mind that instantly is always questioning why would someone do that, and how can I improve the experience for me, in that instance, or for other people.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that many queer people have to go through. It's almost a little bit of a bartering thing, isn't it? Like if I do this, then this is going to be okay for me. And yeah, it's not very fair that it comes down to that, I think, at that young
No.
age. And what were you like at school?
I think there were two different polys. So I think when I was at primary school before we moved, I was very confident. I was very sporty. I used to be have lots of friends, both friends who were girls and friends who were boys, and very confident about myself. Felt very secure about who I was. And then I think when I moved and I suddenly felt different for lots of different reasons, um, I was a lot of that went, and I just did not. It kind of shook me a bit, and until I went, I would say from I was I moved after being in Bedfordshire. I moved. We eventually moved to Milton Keynes when I was about 14, and Milton Keynes was fine. But those years between 11 and 14, I would say, or 12 and 14, I can't quite remember, were very difficult for me, and I felt very isolated and very alone and very unhappy. And then we finally moved to Milton Keynes, and because Milton Keynes is a city that's built on people who don't never grew up there and tend to move there from other places, I kind of fitted in and slotted in. And from then onwards, I think I felt better about myself. But I think, found myself more when I went to university.
Yeah.
So I think there's lots of different versions of Polly, as there is with most people that have changed across the piece. But I would say I found confident Polly when I went to university.
Yeah, I think that's when you get out of those as you get into a bit more of your teenager formative years, you do kind of find your group. You almost find you find the first signs of what a tribe might look like, I
Yeah.
think. Let's jump in then. Obviously, teenage years quite formative for a lot of us. First heartbreaks, realizations about ourselves, maybe queerness or otherwise. What did that look and feel like for you?
So I probably was. I didn't really, I was interested, but I didn't really date guys until I got to about 14, 15. I was quite small for my age and always looked quite young. And then I first started, I guess, dating guys at about 14, 15. And I had a couple of small relationships before I went to university, but I was never completely confident around dating, not like some of my friends who were just always in relationships. And then when I went to uni, I did date quite a lot. I dated most of university. So, and that was quite, and I felt very, it was the time when I felt kind of most confident about myself, um, as a, I guess, as someone, as a woman and someone that guys might date. I did have one relationship that was quite pivotal, but I kind of ignored it at the time when I was in my sixth form with a friend. So when I joined the sixth form at my school in Milton Keynes, there was hardly anyone in the sixth form, and there was a friend of mine that also joined the sixth form, and we just clicked and got on. We were quite different, but we clicked and got on. And I had a, I would say, a bit of a fling with her before I went to university, and I just brushed it off as something and nothing. But now I look back on it, I think it was quite pivotal for me. But I got to university, everybody was dating guys, and I thought, well, I should as well. But when I look back on it, and all my friends when I came out said to me all the boys you dated were very feminine looking, and so that's not, they were always blonde haired and blue eyed. And I now I look back, I can see the signs that at the time I wasn't trying to hide them. Like a lot of people said to me, were you trying to hide it? I wasn't trying to hide it. I genuinely wasn't. I just um, I just assumed that the relationship I had with a woman was just one of those things, and that I was like everybody else going to end up meeting a guy, settling down, getting married. I never really had that gene that told me I wanted kids,
Mm.
but I did have a feeling that at university that I would, like everybody else, I would settle down and marry someone.
And then university, what was that like? What did you study? How was that experience for you?
I absolutely loved university. So I studied English. So I studied English because I did really well in my they were O levels then, O levels and my A levels, and I just love words and I love interpretation. So I went to university and did an English literature degree. I went to Leeds, which was an amazing university, and I chose it. I went and visited a lot of universities, but Leeds was my first choice to go to because it was just such a great campus, and great socially, and I loved it. As soon as I arrived, I made friends that I'm still friends with now, and it was just great for me for lots of different reasons. At the time, there were a lot of issues at home, so escaping home was really positive for me, but also just meeting lots of different people from different backgrounds, being independent, and just making friends that I still have now and are friends for life. And I think doing the degree was almost not important, which sounds really weird now when I talk to people about going to university, because the education for me was far beyond the degree. It was meeting new people, it was all the experiences that I had along the way. It had, I enjoyed doing English and I love books and I love literature, but it was more to do with the experience than the degree.
Oh, for sure. The extracurricular stuff and the experience for me, I did psychology and I've done jack shit with it since. But it was definitely the other stuff alongside
It
it.
was, yeah.
Yeah. With stuff going on at home, like I don't want to skirt over that actually. With stuff going on at home, how did that play out in your life?
Well, it was very difficult for me, and I'll be honest because I'm really open about this. So my dad at the time was in and out of hospital from when I was about 14, 15. He was bipolar, or he would either have manic spells of going absolutely mad and being on top of the world, and then he would just be in bed for about 3 or 4 weeks, and in between times he would often be hospitalized. And my mum had a drink problem, and she'd always had a drink problem. She grew up, my parents were older when they had me. She grew up during the war, she married someone straight after the war and moved out to Aden. She married someone who was in the army, and I don't think there was a lot to do apart from drink. And I think she had an addictive personality. So it was difficult at home, I would say. And that was one of my, it was always expected from my parents. It was the background they came from, that I was going to go to university. But I think I really wanted to get away. I really wanted to escape what was happening at home and go somewhere that I felt that I didn't have those pressures behind me. So I was, and I think, yeah, I think it was really important for me to find my own way. And I had a little brother at the time. My brother was growing up at the time, and I felt I was doing quite a lot supporting him, and I just wanted to get away. So I worked really hard when I was doing my A levels, and I was very good at the self-discipline because I had a real focus of wanting to get away. So I think when I got to university, unlike a lot of my other friends, I was quite comfortable motivating myself and working for myself because I've been doing that for the last sort of 3 or 4 years.
And that's something that you've maintained, really. You are you are an advocate for mental health as well as you are for sobriety, actually. Do you think that experience with your parents is feeds into that?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I was really nervous growing up with basically a dad who had mental health issues and a mum who was an alcoholic, that I was going to pick up some of those tendencies. And I always knew at an early age that I didn't have that addictive personality that my mum did. So although I used to drink a lot at university, it never became an issue to me and it's never been a problem. But I during lockdown I did kind of steer away from drinking, just because it made me feel bad the next morning, not because I had an issue. And I drink a lot less now. I don't never drink, but there will be weeks when I go without drinking and I don't crave a drink. So I was very lucky that I didn't have that gene. But certainly it's always been on my mind around mental health. And of course, when I was growing up, it was a really bad thing. So it was something that I was really fearful of having. And now I'm much more accepting of it. I mean, I have, like a lot of people, I have my moments and I have my challenges. I think I really struggled with my menopause and I was unable to go on HRT because I'd had breast cancer. So it's really difficult when you're a plus 50 woman because you don't know whether you're just having a shit time or whether it's menopause or whether it is something more in terms of mental health. And it's quite difficult to distinguish it. But I certainly found that going through all of that, also during a period when there was lockdown and when things were happening to me personally in terms of relationships, I found it quite difficult to get my head around what it was. But I think rather than trying to diagnose it, my strategy has just been to find things and tools that make me feel better and just use those. And that's kind of what I've done. I mean, I've had times when I've taken antidepressants, but I don't anymore. And I just tend to know the things that will, the tools and what I need to use that will pull me out of having a bad day or not feeling good.
Yeah, because there's just simply not enough conversations around those things, particularly around menopause and mental health and being able to recognize what is just a regular hormone
Yeah,
issue that you're going through versus the links with
sure.
historical cases of mental health. There's not enough talking. Do you feel comfortable talking about it now? I mean, we've spoke about menopause. Is it something that you've kind of overcome that side of things?
I feel very comfortable. I didn't for a long time, but I feel very comfortable talking about it now. Don't have an issue saying to people that I've had challenges and times when I wouldn't say that I've ever been in a situation. I've been very fortunate where I've had a breakdown, but I have had times when I felt that I was struggling with my mental health, and I've been able to take actions to deal with it, which has been good. And I don't have an issue talking about that now. And if anybody asks me, I'd be quite open about it. I actually find, and I've been talking about this more on LinkedIn, I find more of an issue actually with age than I do with mental health. And what I've really noticed since my 50s is that that makes a massive difference when it comes to jobs and the workplace, and people really look at you differently.
Mm.
And I look back to myself when I was in my 20s, 30s, and I think I probably did as well. You look at people that are older and there's a natural subconscious bias, unconscious bias. And I'm really seeing that side of it now. I'm really seeing that it conditions how people see you, particularly in the workplace. And that to me is, and to a lot of my friends, particularly who are women, is a bigger issue now than menopause and mental health, just this kind of how you're viewed as a woman over 50.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, they all feed into each other as well, don't they?
Yeah.
Because, in terms of, you treat it differently, your feelings of self-worth, then you're balancing the hormones, and naturally there's going to be this kind of like interjunction where it's all like you
Yeah.
have to deal with all of those things. And people do have this strange thing that women over 50, should be winding down and stuff, but that's absolutely not the case. Take yourself, for example, you're not slowing down.
No, I'm a classic case of someone that suddenly decided in their 50s to have almost a complete career change. I was thinking about it the other day, who would set up a festival in their 50s? I mean, most people wouldn't set up a festival now in their 20s or 30s. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one for women, because there's a sense of independence that you have. And I've been very fortunate in my career, which means I have a nice house, and I have some securities that mean I can do things that I wouldn't have been able to do when I was younger, and I can take chances and opportunities. So there's this kind of sense of independence, but there's also this challenge around perceptions, and that that you're probably not quite as fit and fast as you used to be if you're running around a festival site. So it's a really interesting time. But I've read some articles recently that have just said that there's a real growth in women over 50 entrepreneurs, and I think there's two reasons for that. One is you have the confidence to set up on your own, and you probably have some sort of financial security to allow you to do it as well. And secondly, I do think a lot of women are dropping out of the workplace because they just don't feel they fit in.
Oh.
And so I think for me, both those are valid reasons why I followed a more entrepreneurial route in the last 6 years.
I love that. I've just recently finished reading Lucy Ryan, Revolting Women, talking
Okay.
exactly about, more women who are not being appreciated by the workplace for what they can deliver because of perception, bias, all that sort of thing. They are going off and looking for something that's going to give them what they want. And over 55% of new business bank accounts are
Yeah,
opened by women over
that's
50.
that's exactly what I've read. And I speak to so many women who come to my festival actually that say, I kind of want to do something different. I want to try and be a coach. I want to try and teach yoga. I want to even some of them that have just given up their jobs, really big jobs. A really good friend of mine was a commercial director, and she's just retired early, and now she coaches. And she went away to India for 8 weeks to learn yoga, to improve her yoga, and now she teaches yoga, and she loves it. And she's just kind of rejected that commercial world to do something that's more purpose driven. And I think I'm seeing that with a lot of people, and certainly a lot of people who come to the festivals. It's not their first job to do it wasn't their first job to do some of the things they teach at the festival. They've come into it later in life.
Absolutely. Women are not in decline. Men, however, on the other end, when they get to a certain age, they generally do go into that. They want to slow it down, but we're not seeing that in women. And I think it's just another example of why we live in a world that's kind of like biased against women. We touched on career here, and you studied English. So let's ask that big old question. What did you want to be when you grew up?
So when I went to university, I wanted to be a journalist, and I'd done some work on local newspapers because my father did have some contacts, and I had a cousin that actually worked for Radio Leeds, so I did a bit of work while I was at university, and that's where I thought I was going to end up. And it wasn't until my final year at university that I really started thinking about it, and I thought, do I want to be a journalist? And at the time, I kind of looked into it a bit more and realized what people got paid. I was quite money orientated then, and thought, actually, no, I don't know if I want to do it. I maybe want to do something different. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I went to what was called the university milk rounds and went to interviews for various things in HR, And the people that really wanted me and the people that offered me jobs, I had quite a lot of interviews, but the people that offered me jobs were around retail. So I ended up joining a company then that was called Dixon's and is now Dixon Stores Group as a graduate trainee. And I didn't have, because I'd stopped doing the journalist thing, I didn't really have any idea what I wanted to do. It just seemed, okay, that sounds like a good job. I'll do that. And that's really what happened. There was no kind of career goal. It's just I enjoyed the interviews, and my view was I'll work in the stores for a year because that's what they wanted you to do, and then I'll choose a job in head office, and maybe I'll do HR or I'll do marketing, and that's kind of what I decided to do.
And here you are now doing a bit of everything.
Yeah, it's funny because I went into stores and I thought I'm going to stay in stores for a year, and I ended up staying in stores for 6 years. And at first, I was dreadful. I was a really bad salesperson. I was absolutely awful, Neil. And then I went and read a load of books, and I thought, well, if I'm going to be in here, I may as well be a good salesperson. So I taught myself, and I learned to be really good at sales. And then I eventually ran stores and was very successful in running stores. And that's how I got the deposit for my first house, because I just won a lot of competitions and won a lot of bonuses. And I think I found my niche, which was going back to that, just what we talked about really, which was that interest in people and why they want to buy things and understanding people. And that's all it was. And that's all I see marketing as, just really understanding the motivation that makes people want to buy something, and then working out how you play with that and how you commercialize that.
Let's chat about failures. Obviously, we're shaped by our failures as much as we are. I think when we talk about careers, I think one thing that's come up again and getting on this podcast is that careers are not as linear as people think they are.
No.
And that we're taught this idea that you do something at uni and then you do it forever. Has there been a time professionally that's felt maybe like a failure or a challenge that's actually kind of like shaped where you've ended up now?
So there's a few, yeah, I mean, I generally speaking, I've been relatively successful in most of the jobs that I've done in my career. I think what shaped me, I wouldn't say it was a failure, but I went charity side in 2012, and I joined the British Heart Foundation. And I had a successful time at the British Heart Foundation, but they restructured and my job went. And then the job they wanted me to do wasn't a job that I wanted to do, I'd be qualified at doing. And it was the first time in my career that I'd ever been faced with redundancy. And it felt like a failure to me. It felt like, even though that wasn't the reason for it, it felt like I was being pushed out of a job that I'd been really successful in. And that hurt a lot. And it was at the same time that I joined the board of Pride in London. And I think what happened is I learned a lot around running a small business, being on the board of Pride in London. So back all those years ago, Pride in London was not what it is now. It was coming out of a going bust in 2012 and taken on by a new CIC in 2013. And they were not the brands throwing money at Pride that throw money at Pride now. So I think I felt a failure in my corporate life or my charity life. And then suddenly I was doing this passion job that I became very successful at. So I think, yes, what happened is what I perceived as a failure in my public life allowed me to put more time into something that I'd found a real passion for, which was around partnerships. And if you think about it, I've talked about how I'm interested in what motivates people, and now I look at it, it was a natural progression for me to move into sponsorship and partnerships. At the time, it wasn't anything I'd done before, but it was a natural progression because it was, again, focusing on that interest of understanding people and their motivations.
Yeah, you can definitely see how that's kind of where you've ended up. And that was really lovely segue onto when was the moment that you found your voice in inclusion, or your call, whatever you want to call it, destination in inclusion, if you like.
Well, I think it was through Pride. And I didn't join it for that reason. I remember distinctly when I saw the advert for Pride, and my girlfriend at the time saw it and said, "You should probably go for this." And I was like, "Oh yeah, maybe I will." And I went for it without thinking it was going to impact my career at all. I just wanted to make a difference, because Pride had played a part in my coming out story. And I think it was just being on there for 4 or 5 years that you get to meet so many different people through Pride. Lots of people from different backgrounds, people who were lots of gay men, for example, who I didn't know at the time. Lots of trans people, lots of people who had multiple intersectionality when it came to them. And I just realized how expansive and different the community was, and how important inclusion was, and that we didn't all fit one size. So I think it would have been somewhere along that journey. And I don't think there was a particular day or a point, but I suddenly realized that I was doing other charity jobs at the time, but I suddenly realized that I was much more interested in my gay job than my day job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, love that. I love it when people use the term day job and gay job. No, that's wonderful. And Pride had a massive part in your coming out story. You happy to share a little bit?
Well, yeah, just when I was in my 40s, and what happened was I was very angry at work. I was getting more and more frustrated, which I now realize was because I wasn't being myself. I was a brand director at Wix. I left Wix, and I got a payout, and I joined WH Smith's to do some contract work, but I decided that I wanted some time out. So I booked to go to Nicaragua for about 7 weeks. This sounds really weird, doesn't it? But I don't know why I picked Nicaragua, and I had to learn Spanish to go there. I just wanted a real challenge. So I went to Nicaragua for 7 weeks, and it wasn't like I woke up on the beach and had an idea that I was gay. But as I came back, I thought, right, okay, I've probably been denying this bit about me that feels like I might be bisexual. Well, that's what I thought it was at the time, or at least queer. And I got back in February, and then I kind of did some exploration, but I didn't see anybody, didn't go on any dating sites. And then as it came to Pride Month, I said to one of my friends, who's still a good friend, I want to go to Pride because I think I might be gay. And she was like, I'll come with you. So we went there, and she left me on my own at one point. She said, look, Paul, you've just got to stay and experience this. And it was as I sat and just watched the crowds, and I realized I was queer, and I felt comfortable. I felt like I'd come home, if that makes sense.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
That's all
Yeah,
right.
never heard that before. It's lovely. Um, Talk to me about someone who shaped you along the way, a key person.
God, it sounds really corny, but I would say my mum. So my mum actually passed away when I was relatively young, so 28. I say relatively young. At the time, I thought I was obviously older, but now I realise it was a young age to go. And my mum had a really difficult life. So she lost her mother at a young age. She was a twin, and she lost her sister at a young age, her twin sister. She then lost her husband at a young age to cancer, and there were lots of things in her life that were really challenging. But she was such a strong woman and such a strong role model. And the big thing that I think I always learned from my mum is her kindness and her empathy towards other people. So whatever happened in her life and however crap her day was, she was always much more interested in how other people were. So whenever she went into work, her friends would say they knew she was having a tough time with my dad, but her first question would be like, when they used to say, "How are you, Wendy?" She'd say, "Let's not talk about me. How are you? What's going on with you?" And she was quite a liberal woman, and a kind of a woman before her time. So she was always really focused on me having a good education, focused on me buying a house, not relying on a man. I think that's quite funny but she really taught me that I could have a career and I could do anything a man could do, because she was frustrated that she never had that opportunity. And she was very focused on encouraging me to do things, but never pushing me. So I never felt forced carry on with an education. I never felt pushed to go to university. I just always felt supported in my decision making. So I think she had a really lovely way of getting me to do the things that she wanted me to do without making it feel like she was forcing me into situations. She was even smoking, for example, because her first husband died of cancer. She said to me, if you want to smoke, smoke. I don't really care whether you smoke or not, but just remember what happened. And I never smoked. Not well, I might have tried a cigarette, but I never smoked. So she was very clever at making all of us as children successful, because all of us have been successful in our own right, but without making it feel pressured.
I love that. She clearly knew that you were not going to be someone who was forced to do something, and so
No,
she had your number.
she did have my number to completely and utterly.
I love that. Does happiness and success look and feel like you thought it would?
Gosh, that's a good question. I don't know what I ever thought it would be. I guess when you're growing up, you assume you're going to settle down with someone. I never thought I was going to have children, or it was never that strong in my mind that I was going to have children. Um, I think over the years, I've realized that happiness comes in lots of different forms and can be small things as well as big things. And the most important thing is recognizing the things that make you happy and recognizing the things that don't. And I think sometimes we can watch what other people do and look at other people's lives and assume that's what we want, but it isn't. And that happiness is very individual. And I've become a lot more focused, I think, on the things that make me happy rather than the things that other people think should make me happy, or I think should make me happy. And so I would say that, yes, I have changed because I really recognize more the things that make me happy. If I'm having a really bad day at home and I'm not feeling great, I'll go and cook because I love cooking. And as soon as I cook and I make something, I instantly feel better. So I think I've just understood the things that make me happy more.
That's wonderful. Finally, just in last segment for the last question for this segment, looking back, what are you most proud of so far?
Wow. That's a good question. I think buying this house, I'm sitting in the house that I live in now. I think for me, being able to buy a 3-bedroom house in Ealing 20 years ago was a big deal. To me, that signified that I delivered some of the things that my mum wanted. And I just love this house. I lived in a small flat beforehand in Ealing. I've been very fortunate because I've had good careers and I bought my houses at the right time. So there's been some luck in it. But when I moved into this house, which had and I put a beautiful kitchen in and it had 3 bedrooms, and it was I just instantly felt at home when I first visited this house. And I think it's probably the thing that made me the most proud that I was able to buy a nice house, and I've lived in here for 20 years, and it's just been a place that I've really enjoyed. I think most people probably expect me to say something about pride or something about my career, but when I think about it, it is that complete moment that I walked into this house when I got the keys and just stood and thought, okay, this is not something that I ever dreamed I'd be able to do. And I did that when I was, in my mid-40s, and just felt, mid-30s, and felt really, I'm really happy to have bought this house on my own at that age.
This is home. This is home, and I'm doing it, and I did it my
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
I love that. The House of Happiness is London's ultimate sober clubbing extravaganza. We're led and delivered but created for all, whether teetotal, sober curious, or just taking a booze snooze. We love a day rave, and on a Saturday afternoon you can expect banging house tunes, DJs on decks, dancers on podiums, and a fully stocked alcohol-free bar. Flamboyant, bold, with a glitter station to boot. We're all about safe, inclusive fun, and we even have a pre-meet so that you can make new sober buddies before you hit the dance floor. Grab your tickets from Instagram now at House of Happiness Official, and we'll see you on the dance floor. Polly, are you ready for some quick-fire questions?
I am ready for some quick-fire questions. Let's go.
What album, book, or movie has had a lasting impact on you?
So this sounds funny, but when I was at school and I was doing my A levels, we read The Great Gatsby, and it was the book that made me fall in love with English literature and want to do an English degree. So I just love turning the pages. And I just love the book. I'm not going to go into loads of different why, but I just love the book. But it was the book that made me go, right, I'm going to do an English degree, and that's the degree that I'm going to go to do at university. And I I think the reason it's had a lasting impact on me is because I just love reading, and every so often when I get a book that I can't put down or has a lasting impact on me, it takes me back to when I first read The Great Gatsby at A level and thought, I can't put this book down and I can't stop thinking about it.
Amazing. What's the saying you live by and one that you'd put in the bin?
So the saying I live by is a saying that we used to have at Dixon's called JFDI. Do you know what JFDI stands for?
No.
So it was a Dixon saying, which was just fucking do it. And we used to get, I loved working at Dixon's because it was just very simple. And every so often your manager would come to you and ask you to do something that made no sense. And you'd go, why am I doing that? And he'd say, it's a JFDI poll. And you just knew you had to get on with it. And I just love it because sometimes instead of having to explain everything to everyone, I like to be able to say to people, this is just a JFDI. Please don't spend time arguing with it. And as long as you don't overuse it, it's a great phrase.
And I guess you've really like harnessed that as something for yourself as well, even particularly through those challenging times when it feels like things are busy and you take just set JFDI.
Yeah, I tell it to myself a lot. I say JFDI poll. And the one that I don't like is when sentences start with no offense, but because that usually means there is offense involved.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a bit like when you talk about being passive aggressive. It's
Yeah.
still aggressive. What has been the best adventure of your life so far? Like Nicaragua sounded like a great
Yeah,
adventure.
I think I've been fortunate to have time out and travel a couple of times, but I think Nicaragua was cool um, because it was the second time I'd gone traveling. I went for about 9 months when I was 30, but this time I was a lot more confident about it. I learned Spanish to go. I can't quite believe I did 6 weeks of intense Spanish lessons because I don't know if it's the same now, but they don't speak any English there. And I was very confident at the time. I'd just run a marathon. I felt very happy about myself and I just loved it. It was a real adventure. I went on my own and I met some great people along the way and had some great experiences. It's a beautiful country, and from surfing on one side to Caribbean beaches on the other to hiking volcanoes to kind of Sandinista revolutionary towns, it was beautiful and I enjoyed every minute of it.
That's bloody amazing. How's your Spanish now?
Not very good because I've lost it. But yeah, it was great. And I did it when I had a little bit, I know this sounds awful, but I did it when I had a little bit of money about me. So if I wanted to stay somewhere nice, I could. But most of the time I backpacked and I think I stayed in the cheapest room I've ever stayed in my life, which was $5 a night.
Amazing. Would you do something like that again?
Yeah, I'm planning to go to India for 3 to 4 weeks at Christmas. And I'll probably do something that involves some sort of retreat or some sort of yoga. So yes, I would.
Lovely. What three words would you use to describe your origin story?
Drive, passion, energy.
Drive, passion, and energy. You definitely like those definitely embody everything that you are. I love that. Polly, are we all right to fast forward?
We are.
We're not going to fast forward too much. What exciting things do you have coming up next? I know we've touched on some of them, but
um, I think I'm really excited about the Pride swims. I'm quite nervous about them, but excited about them. And that's been a real passion project. And that's been a real something that I've kind of taken a lot of the learnings that I've had over the last 3 years and thrown them together. So I'm excited about rolling that out. I think that's probably the biggest thing at the moment, seeing where the festival goes. And I think the growth about spoken speakers as well. So I think I've got 3 really exciting projects to work on, and I don't quite know where they're all going to go, but I feel very confident and happy about them.
Good. They're going. So, it's
Yeah.
exciting to see where they'll end up. And what brings you joy?
We spoke about one of them. I love cooking, and if I don't cook for a while, I know I'm not in a good space. So I love just sitting in my kitchen and cooking. I love taking my dog for a walk
Love Noreen.
in the mornings. Yeah, Noreen the destroyer. And I love being outside, and that's something. It was funny when I grew up in Dorset. My parents always trying to take us to Lulworth Cove and places. We were always bored unless we could go to a fun fair. And they used to, I remember my mum saying, when you get older, you're going to love being outside and you're going to love being in nature. And I was like, I won't, I'll be bored by it. And I love it. So I think just travel and seeing new spaces and, yeah, so I think food and cooking and being with my pet, and I never thought I'd have a dog. So I love that. And then travel and adventure and being outdoors.
Wonderful. What takeaways do you have for anyone listening that wants to carve out a career in inclusion? You've kind of like doing loads of different things to make the world a more inclusive space. So, anyone listening that wants to either start a new project or go down a full-on career in it.
I think the biggest advice I would have is volunteer somewhere. So the biggest impact that I had on my inclusion career was volunteering at Pride. So go and volunteer somewhere. There's loads of great charities, loads of great organisations that would need your support. And it's a great way of finding out whether it is for you, because it's not for everyone. And that doesn't mean that you can't be inclusive. It just means that that may not be your passion. So go and volunteer somewhere, learn the ropes and understand what's involved. So get involved with some amazing projects or charities would be probably the first bit of advice. And the second thing would be, don't be afraid to get things wrong. I mean, I've been working in this area, as you know, now for about 10 years, and I still misgender people, not on purpose, by accident. I still say things that aren't right. But we all learn from our mistakes. And as long as you go into the world and go into situations with good intent, it's fine to make mistakes, and you will make mistakes. And the third one is, whatever you do, however inclusive you're trying to be, once you put your neck out, you're going to get a load of criticism. And that's what happens. I was looking at some feedback from the festival from last year, and I have to tell my team, who get really upset when we get critical feedback, it's fine. And some of it feels frustrating, and some of it you just have to accept. So you're never going to get everything right, and you are going to get, even when you're trying to do things well and trying to make a change, just accept that you're going to get a kick in still, and just take it for what it is.
Use it, learn from it. Polly, great practical takeaways there. Thank you. And finally, do you have any words of wisdom, encouragement, or advice for anyone to help them get to wherever they're going? And I know that's a big question to finish.
Yeah, I go back to what I talked about earlier. Momentum is everything. So don't always think that everything has to be perfect before you start something. Just get on with it. A lot of the projects that I've done have not started off the way that I intended. Started off one way and then changed to be something else. So just get on with it. Just start moving. It's the same, when I know you run and I've run marathons before. Stop thinking about the 26th mile and the marathon, and just start thinking about the small steps and the training that you have to go along the way, and just adjust. But you're never going to get anywhere if you don't start and you want everything to be perfect straight away.
Holly, thank you so much for pressing pause and rewind with me. I'm so grateful to spend this time with you. I feel like I get to speak to you a lot, but never in this much depth about life. So.
Some new stories come out, but it was a pleasure. Thank you, and thank you for your time and for doing this. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
See you soon.
Bye. Oh my God, I absolutely loved getting to chat to Polly about her origin story. She's someone that I talk to so much when it comes to like little projects and stuff that I get involved in, and the work that she does and the work that I do. And it was really great to take a moment to really get to know her that little bit better. I loved what she shared about being a kid and not wanting to be held back, you know, like throwing herself out of a high chair because she just wanted to get shit done, and she does. She said shared some really personal stuff about her family, and I'm always really grateful for people that open up about this stuff. And you know, particularly when it comes to the effect that Polly's mum and the influence that she had on her, and who she is now is really beautiful. And Polly's coming out story, you know, feeling sitting at Pride, and just realizing that that was who she was, and that sense of belonging. The same way in her home, which is her greatest achievement so far, is it creates that for her. And I love that what brings her joy is her love of cooking and her dog Noreen, who I've met, who is gorgeous. Thank you so much, Polly. You are a force to be reckoned with, and I'm so grateful that our paths crossed last year. If you enjoyed this episode of Pause and Rewind, please do share it with anyone who you think might be interested in listening. I'm so grateful, and yeah, stay tuned for more episodes. Cheers.